Hey, this is Dave Glander with Reasons for Hope coming at you with part 5 of this end time series on eschatology that has been hopefully growing you in your knowledge and in your faith. And more so than anything, I pray that it's growing you closer to the Lord Jesus Christ, because that's the whole point of doing everything that we're doing. So I'm going to get right into this one, since this is part 2 of Who is the Antichrist. Again, part 5 in the series, part 2 of Who is the Antichrist. Let's dig right back into it. I'm just going to recap real quick. You know, this calls for a mind with wisdom, and it talks about the kingdoms that had to be there, the criteria for the 7 kingdoms. And so we just went through that, but I need to recap just because of the fact it's so important for us to understand where we get this kingdom from in order to look for where the king's going to come from. And so 5 have fallen. That's Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. And then, of course, we had the one is, and that was John writing at the time of the Roman Empire. The one that is had the 2 different legs that came from it. You had Rome, you had Constantinople. Constantinople falling in 1453. And who they fell to is the one who is yet to come that John was looking forward in the future. And that was the Islamic Jihad. And, of course, we have the Islamic Jihad taking over both the predecessor or the successor of the predecessor, and then the area of Jerusalem in its captivity. So now that we've qualified that, just to make sure, we went back and said that Islam definitely qualifies as the 7th kingdom. Let's move into the rest of it. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, he was called Abram before he went to Abraham, had born to him no children, but she had, and remember, there was a promise that God had given to Abram and said, I will make your descendants as great as the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. So obviously Sarai has to have a baby, and that hadn't happened yet. So she said, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. That's Genesis chapter 16. Now, let me tell you what the worst advice that I've ever heard from anybody is a second from Eve saying, here, eat this. This is probably the worst advice. What Sarai ends up telling Abram to do is go and start the Islamic culture, the Islamic movement, the Islamic people, because Ishmael was born to Hagar. Ishmael, according to Islam, is the father of Islam, is the father of the faith, the Abrahamic faith, because he was the firstborn. He should have gotten the first blessing from the father. And so, go on, Genesis chapter 16, the angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with child and you will have a son. So she's confirming the fact that, yes, Abram took Hagar and she's going to have a son. The angel went on to say, you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard you in your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility to the east of all of his brothers. Now, if that's not a perfect picture of Islam, Islam has always kind of been the problem child in the family, or the kid in class who's always getting sent to the principal's office because of their extremism. And so when we look at Islam, we see he really is a wild donkey of a man. But there's something interesting to note about the role of Hagar and Ishmael. And I want to go back to the Jewish Midrash. And the Jewish Midrash is one of the high teachings that the Jewish scholars and have leaned on heavily for historical insight and everything else as the development of the Jewish nation had developed. And so the Midrash says this, according to the Midrash, Hagar was the daughter of the king of the Pharaoh of Egypt. Remember, she was from Egypt, but the Midrash says she was actually a daughter of the Pharaoh of Egypt. When she saw the miracle which God performed for Sarah's sake, and you can go and read that in the Bible, to save her from the hands of the Egyptian king during Abraham's visit there, she said, it is better to be a slave in Sarah's house than a princess in my own, because she knew that Sarah's God was the God that was the true God. And she said, in her own words, it's better to be a slave in Sarah's home than a princess in my own. So it's very interesting. When she was cast away, when Sarah had this problem and she was cast away, God sent her into a specific place. And in Genesis 21, we see, while he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got for him a wife from Egypt. So we're back to this connection that she has with Egypt. And we're going to go to chapter 37 now in Genesis and see something very interesting about this connection. It says, so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. And so we see this connection of the Ishmaelites in the Saudi Arabian area, and this connection with Egypt is very, very clear. So it says, while he was living in the deserts of Paran. That word actually is pronounced Faran. It's the difference between the letter Pe and Fe. And Faran is the ancient name for Mecca and the name of the mountain in which Muhammad began to receive the Quran. So where she is cast out to is the actual place where later in years, Muhammad is supposedly getting these visions from Allah, and the angel Gabriel is there with him. That's another teaching for another time. But he ends up getting these visions from the exact same place, and it's in the area of Mecca. And so then God said in Genesis chapter 21, then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave it to the boy for drink. And so there was this well that was over in this area of the desert of Faran, which is in Mecca. And according to Wikipedia, which means it's true because everything on Wikipedia is true, says the well of Zamzam is a well located within the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, 66 feet east of the Kaaba, the holiest place in Islam. According to the Islamic belief, it is a miraculously generated source of water from God, which began thousands of years ago when Abraham's infant son Ishmael was thirsty and kept crying for water. So this well of Zamzam, according to the Ishmaelites, according to Islam, is the well that was in Genesis 21 that Hagar got the water from. And it's funny to me that there's even Zamzam Cola that comes from that region. It's Coca-Cola, but it's Zamzam Cola from that region because of the importance of that well that's over in Mecca. So anyways, let me give you a little short history of Islam, because remember how I was saying that I believe that it's the kingdom of Islam, but we need to get a little bit more specific about the Antichrist. And I want to start to break that down. This is a little bit of a shorter teaching. I want to start to break that down a little bit into the short history of Islam. First thing is, Muhammad belonged to the pagan tribe of Quraysh. That was his home family tribe, was the Quraysh people. They worshiped the god of Hubal, which we also understand as Baal. And so the Qurayshi tribe, before Islam started, because of the visions that Muhammad was getting, his actual tribe was worshiping the god of Baal. After his first visitation, Muhammad tried to convert his own tribesmen. It did not work very well. They kind of laughed at him, but that's a whole other thing. From 610 to 620, the Quran is somewhat of a peaceful book. That's because it was the Meccan verses. It wasn't until 620 when he left to get away from his people that were actually making fun of him, because they called him a demon-possessed man who would have these... It's a very long story that I don't have time to get into, but they made fun of him. So he went over to Medina, and that was when he went over to Medina, and he got a bunch of misfits together, and they started believing what he said. And then the Medinian verses were written, and the Medinian verses are completely contrast to the Meccan verses that are written. And the Medinian verses are very brutal. They're the ones slaying where you find them, cut their heads off. That's where that was. So when you hear sometimes about Islam saying it's a religion of peace, that could be true if the Meccan verses were the only ones that were ever written. But if you add the Medinian verses to complete the Quran, which you have to, then it is definitely diametrically opposed to anything peaceful. It was the Battle of Badr in 624 that changed things around, because that little group of misfits that Muhammad had gathered together that started to believe him, they went back to his hometown, the Battle of Badr, back to his hometown, and with a very few people slayed the entire village, and they gave credit to God for that defeat. Islam theology is divided into two parts, the Meccan and the Medinian. In the Quran, it says this is the crazy part, because of the complete difference between Mecca and Medinian verses, because there's such a contrast. There's the law of abrogation, which you can find in Quran chapter 2. The Islamic doctrine of abrogation, nashk, is the idea that Allah can change or cancel what he tells Muslims. This is the direct quote from the Quran. None of our revelations do we abrogate to cause to be forgotten, or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better or similar. Don't you know that Allah has the power over all things? So when the Quran disagrees with itself, which is what the Meccan and Medinian verses do so much, it's okay, because Allah is allowed to change his mind and institute something better. So if that's the case, then the Medinian verses would be the better verses. And if the Medinian verses are the better verses, which first and foremost, our God doesn't change, but that's a whole other story. If the Medinian verses are better, then that means that they are the ones to be trusted. Those are the evil ones. Those are the ones that, if you want to know what Islam really exists and looks like, look at ISIS. ISIS was the ones who were out there actually living out the Medinian verses, which is what Muhammad died on. And so if you really want to know what it looks like, it's the Medinian verses. Muhammad's first vision shook him at his core. He literally thought he was being possessed by a demon. And he was married to his second cousin, Khadijah. He worked for her uncle in the trade business. And so as he was working for her uncle, he meets Khadijah. They end up getting married. She had to convince him that these were not demonic visions, but they were actually visits from the angel Gabriel. And Muhammad was so scared that he wanted to commit suicide after getting these visions. This is the hadith of Bukhari. And the hadith is a commentary on the Quran, because the Quran doesn't make any sense. It's written in length of verses, so it's not in any sort of order. It's shortest to longest, and so it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's if you ask an Islamic scholar and they were being honest, they would say it doesn't really make any sense, but that's okay because we have the hadith and we have the sirat, which combined together give us the Islamic doctrine, okay? And so if you go to the hadith and you read, it talks about this time when Muhammad wanted to kill himself because he was so shaken at his core about these visions that he was getting that his wife had to convince him weren't demonic. Here's what it says. Prophet became so sad, we have heard that he intended several times to throw himself from the tops of the high mountains, and every time he went up to the top of a mountain in order to throw himself down, Gabriel, the same Gabriel that supposedly in our book is the same Gabriel, which I don't have time to get into, but it's a direct contrast to our biblical Gabriel. It says this, Gabriel would appear to him before him and say, "O Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's apostle in truth." So Gabriel would have to convince the founder of Islam not to kill himself because these weren't demonic visions, but they were angelic visions in the word of Allah. So here's the thing. Hubal was understood to be the lord of the Kaaba, which remember, Hubal is Baal, and Hubal Baal is understood to be the lord of the Kaaba, or the moon god of Kaaba, which the significance there is the crescent moon within Islam is so predominant everywhere because that's how it started. What Muhammad did was basically just kind of steal from Hubal or Baal worship and just kind of change it over once the Battle of Badr in 624 happened. He just kind of changed it over to fit that very well. There's similarities between Hubal and Allah worship, which Allah worship would be the worship of now that we see now. The similarities are this: worship of the Lord of the Kaaba. It's the same thing. Kissing the black stone, same exact thing. That's what Baal worship required. That's what Islamic worship requires. Praying 5 times a day facing Mecca, or sometimes they'll change that into the Salat prayer of only 3 instead of 5. But a devout Muslim prays 5 times a day facing Mecca. It's the same thing they did with Baal worship. Fasting on the 10th day of Muharram, which is Ramadan, which is the New Year. Fasting on the 10th day in order to do it. That was the same thing that Baal worship did. And then the pilgrimage called Hajj is the trip that every Muslim must make, every Muslim man must make within his lifetime, is a trip to Mecca so that they can walk around Mecca backwards 7 times and kiss the black stone. Those were all exact same things that Baal worship, or Kaaba, the moon god Kaaba, was doing before Muhammad got there. So it's not like he came and reinvented anything. He just took the worship of Baal and transmitted it into actual worship of Allah. It was a stolen thing. So I want to point something out to you that I think is very unique. 10 horns he saw, 10 kings. Then the people of the prince who is to come. It's Revelation and Daniel. And then another one out of Revelation that I think is very strange. Not strange, but it's interesting. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony, right? They came out of the tribulation. They were beheaded. So we have kings, we have princes, and we have people who are being beheaded. The only ones who actually still have kings and princes to this day is Islam. Who's the only one beheading people nowadays? Islam. And so Islam, again, fits the role of kings, princes, people being beheaded. It fits very well. I want you to watch this.
It's chi, psi, and stigma in the original language.
Guess what they think it is?
Yes.
They didn't know what these symbols were. So they thought they were Greek symbols. Then they began to evolve into, let's see, what do these symbols really mean? Why would there be 3 Greek symbols into the text? Why would God put 3 Greek symbols as a mystery? Well, God is not an author of mysteries, by the way. His yoke is easy. What they thought were symbols were in reality a different script than even the Greek. God is not interested in gematria. Gematria is the process of adding numerals regarding names. Maybe you take Hillary Clinton. H is number is this, and and then you add it up, see if Hillary Clinton means 666, and maybe she's the beast. Maybe it's Gorbachev, so you write Gorbachev, and you add 666. Gematria was a process that was used in witchcraft. God is not interested in this gematria stuff, okay? So this developed, and then the translation started to put down 666 because they thought it was about the gematria. But if you look at the Codex Sinaiticus and the different codexes, they don't have 666. They got these symbols. Some even translated these symbols as 616, but it's not. When I first saw the Codex Vaticanus, I was literally shocked because I could read the text. It was Arabic. And as I look at it, it had these, what thought these symbols, this and this in a very kind of circular way, and then you had this symbol, all right? Now this is an Arabic word. You can film it and ask any Arab, what is that word? Bism, in the name of, and this word, you can ask any Arab what that word is. Bism Allah, in the name of Allah, was on that badge that people put in their foreheads as John documented what he saw on the godly video. God showed him. And that will be the symbol of Islam, which is the two swords. That is a symbol in Saudi Arabia. It's a symbol of Islam from the eons of time. As a matter of fact, if you don't want to believe me, I urge you to watch a movie called Kingdom of Heaven. I don't like the movie, the outcome of the movie, that Salah ad-Din was a nice guy and the Crusades were the bad guys and that kind of thing. When he's sitting in a tent talking to the king, you will see at some point in time, pause it, when you see Salah ad-Din and his men with these badges on their arms. Because it says on the right arm, the arm is dexios. Dexios means arm and not specifically hand. The word for mark is charagma, Greek, which means badge of servitude. It's a literal badge, all right? Made out of paper, etching, cloth, that is put on the forehead, and on it is several things. It could be the name of the beast, the mark of the beast, the multitude of the beast, and being the name of the beast is the Islamic declaration they already put on their foreheads. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, or it will have Bismillah on it, and it will have the mark of the beast. It could be the crescent moon itself. All kinds of flavors that shows allegiance to the Antichrist. In fact, even the Prophet Muhammad ordered, I have it with me here, there it is. Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, declared, Allah will save a man from my nation above all men in the day of judgment. When they open the registers, and the register will be as far as you can see with your sins. And then he is asked, are there any excuses for your sins? And he says, no, Lord. Do you have any excuses? He says, no. And then the Lord will tell him, you have only one good deed that you have done. And he will bring out a badge on it, and it says, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger, and then by this he will enter paradise. In other words, that badge will rescue the Muslim to enter into the kingdom of his heaven, where that, in reality, will enter him into eternal damnation. It's so clear. All the things that is going on with Islam, it is so clear as a whistle. The reversal of what you believe is what they believe, the antithesis of the Bible.
I want you to remember what he said about the Islamic belief being the antithesis of that. Everything is the opposite of what we believe. Because I'm about to unpack that in a minute, but I want to go back to what he said about the Codex Vaticanus. So the Codex Vaticanus dating back to AD 350 is what he's referring to. And if you'll see, that is where it says supposedly 660 and 6. It's not 666. That's what everybody said. The number of the beast is 666, and you get to the grocery store and your total comes up to 666, and you're like, I got to buy a pack of gum because I can't do it. That's not even what that means, right? And especially that lady with the monster can. If you haven't seen that, don't. It's a waste of time. She just doesn't understand what that means, because it would be 660 and 6 if it was anything at all. But I think his argument is very valid, because John's being told to, like, write down these things that he sees, and he's writing down things like, I see a mountain of fire being thrown into the sea. I think that's a direct reference to a nuclear weapon, just like their flesh will die before their tongue rots out of their mouth. I think that's, again, an effect of nuclear, but he's trying to describe these things. When he gets to the name of the beast, or the number of his name, he comes along here and he sees this inscription that is on these bands, or these badges, and if you look, that is Bism Allah, which means in the name of Allah. That's written in Arabic. And if you look at the similarities between Bism Allah and what's written as the supposedly 660 and 6 in the Codex Vaticanus, it's an exact replica. And then when you take the swords of Islam, which is iconic as much as a crescent moon is, and you add it to it, his argument's very strong. It's a very strong argument that says, if you want to identify who the Antichrist is going to be, and remember, we've already said that the Islamic kingdom has to be the one. We've already said that there's all these signs that point to the fact that, as I said in one of I think it was episode 3, Rome is the nicest thing that's ever been to Islam. If you want, or to Jewish people, if you want to know where this argument goes, if you want to know where this battle goes, it goes back to Isaac and Ishmael. Every single time you can turn around and go back, and it's the two sons of Abraham, one through Hagar, one through Sarah, and it's Ishmael and Isaac. If you want to know what's going on, you've got to look at those two kingdoms that have developed in the fight that's been going on for 3,800 years. It's not going to be some new fight. It's the same thing that's been around forever. This is why it's important, because we go to Revelation chapter 13, and it says, and it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Now, this seemed kind of kooky. Like, man, who's going to do that? Nobody's going to do that. I'm just going to go there. Man, the pandemic, the China virus, showed me how this is going to happen. Because I saw people just like fallen over to wear 2 masks if that's what they told you to do. You can't, when at times you went to California or Hawaii, you couldn't go into restaurants without a vaccine card. I had to turn down a trip, an exploratory trip to Israel, because I didn't have the vaccine card. There was things I could not do because I didn't have the vaccine card. But there were people, and I'm not picking on you, if you got vaccinated, that is your own personal decision. What I'm trying to say is this: I couldn't believe how many people just kind of fell over and were like, okay, tell me what to do. Because when panic hit, and that's what the coronavirus was, when panic hit, it devastated everybody's understanding, and everybody just freaked out. And so I can see that now coming to fruition when it comes to this. When you have a great panic that's going to hit, and we know that's coming, that people are going to freak out. And if they're told they need to receive the mark of this person who's telling them you can't buy or trade, if you can't buy food and groceries or gas or anything like that for your family, I now can see after the China virus how that's going to happen. Okay, that was a weird part for me. This is a picture of the Bism Allah and the swords being on the foreheads of Islam across the board. They also have it on their arms. So again, we have kings, princes, the only culture that beheads people, and the only culture that wears Bism Allah on their foreheads and on their heads as a mark of where they're at. So I want to turn the corner and start to land this plane with Islamic eschatology. And this is coming straight from the Quran. It's Surah chapter 2. It is not righteousness that you turn your faces towards the east and the west, but righteous is he who believes in Allah, that's the first one, and the last day, that's the second one, and angels, the third one, and the scriptures and the prophets, the fourth and the fifth. Those are the 5 pillars of Islam. If you'll notice, belief in Allah is first. The next one is the belief in the last day. That's how important it is. It's listed as second. In the church nowadays, I hate to see it, that eschatology almost isn't taught at all. End times isn't taught at all. The last days isn't even talked about at all. in Islam, the importance of the last day. And then the third one being angels. Why is that? Because supposedly it was the angel Gabriel who came to Muhammad and verified that no, these are actually visions from God, from Allah. And so it was the belief in Allah, the last day, and the angels. And then in the last one that we're about to cover in Series 6, I may touch on the fact about how Islam believes in angels and the way that they reenact or interact with them and stuff like that. It's they're called jinn, and it's very important. The jinn are very important to them. So that's Islamic eschatology. But what you need to know is this: Islamic eschatology is not prophecy. Remember what Walid Shobat said: it's a mirror image. It's the antithesis. It's but a negative image of Bible prophecy. So there are minor and major signs, and most anticipated is the central sign is the coming of the Al-Mahdi, the guided one. And now I need to preface this: Sunnis make up the majority of Islam across the world. Shia is the second, and it is not the majority. Sunni is the majority. Sunni do not call themselves Twelvers or believe in the 12th Imam, whereas Shia does. Why do I think it's so important that it's Shia that does? Shia is the one that governs most of all of the big terrorist states, the ones that are actually controlling. You don't really hear much from Sunni states. You hear everything about Shia states. Shia is the one who ripples the waters every single time. Sunni just kind of exists in the background. So I don't think Sunni is even as important to talk about as it is to talk about Shia explanation of Islamic eschatology. He is known as the 12th Imam, or the Imam al-Mahdi. He is the 12th descendant of Muhammad, who came along and was supposedly buried in a well in Syria, but he is the one that they're looking for. And as a crazy side note, the Imam is supposed to show up according to Islamic prophecy. When terror has struck the land, it's going to awaken the Imam's presence and come. That's why Bakur al-Baghdadi was trying to cause chaos. That's why Syrian president, that's why the Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, that's why they're causing trouble. They're not afraid for trouble to come to their land because they believe that they will usher in the presence of the Imam al-Mahdi if they bring trouble to their land. That's part of the fulfillment of the prophecy. According to the Hadith, remember the Hadith is the commentary on the Quran. According to the Hadith, it says this: Muhammad said, there will be 4 peace agreements between you and the Romans, and they look at Romans as the Western world, really. It's anybody, Western, Christian, Jew, the Western world. This is crazy. The 4th agreement will be mediated through a person who will be from the progeny of the honorable Aaron and Moses, brother. Okay, now remember, back in the 3rd series, I talked about how the Aaronic priesthood has been reestablished. The Cohenites have been reestablished. For the first time in thousands of years, we know the Cohenite priest. And so the honorable Aaron, which is Moses' brother, and I think there's going to be a sect of Jews who actually fall for this entire treaty that he's going to want to sign with them. They're going to fall for this, along with, I think, the Roman Pope, whoever he may be at the time, will also fall for this entire thing. And as I said in the 4th part, I believe, or the 2nd part in Psalm 83, it was the 3rd part, where you're seeing the Abrahamic Family Center coming together. You're seeing the blending of all of these different religions coming together, saying we all worship the same. It will be for progeny of the honorable Aaron and will be upheld for 7 years. Now, that's according to their prophecy. Remember, ours says Daniel's 70th week. They're saying 7 years, but it's going to be in the opposite manner. And here's what I mean by that. The Mahdi, who's coming, according to them, will ride a white horse. That's exactly what Revelation says about the Antichrist. The Mahdi will be a miraculous archaeologist, even uncovering the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Mahdi will lead the greatest conversion of Jews and Christians. Everything that they say about the Mahdi fits the description of our Antichrist. The Mahdi will enforce Islamic calendar based on the career of Muhammad, and currently, as of 2020, it's 1443 in their year. That's based on the flight of Muhammad from Mecca to Medina in 622, marking the beginning of the Muslim era. So he's going to try and change the calendar across the board. You got to understand, Islam means submission. And so when they talk about doing something, they're talking about with everybody, that everybody must convert. When the calendar changes, it's for everybody. He's also going to do this. The Mahdi will change the laws to Sharia law. Now, are you picking up something here? He's going to try and change the calendar, and he's going to try and change the laws. Now, we can easily go back over to Daniel, and he said he will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. Again, Islam's the only one. Rome's not going to try and change the laws. They're not going to try and change the times. Islam is the only one that fits that again. But guess what? Islam has their own Jesus. His name is Isa. Isa supposedly is going to decline the offer of the Mahdi to say the prayer. Because what's supposed to happen is Isa is supposed to appear in Damascus, right? And he's supposed to appear in Damascus, meet with the Imam al-Mahdi, and travel to make Hajj down to Mecca. And they're going to go from Damascus, Syria, which has been destroyed. They're going to go from Damascus, Syria. They're going to travel through. They're going to stop at the temple. And this is where I believe the abomination that causes desolation happens. They're going to stop at the temple. And Jesus, their Jesus, Isa, is going to decline the offer and point to the Mahdi instead. And he's going to be in the inner courts when he does that. And then they're going to continue their Hajj down to Mecca, okay? So here's the crazy part. Jesus said, if they say I am out in the desert, do not go. Where is Damascus, Syria? It's desert, especially after it's been destroyed. It's going to be a deserted land. He even told us if they say I'm out there, don't go. He said, if they say I'm in the inner courts, do not go in. So Jesus has already told us, hey, look, they're going to tell you I'm in the desert. That's not me. They're going to tell you I'm on the inner court. That's not me. Jesus has already warned us about these things. And this is Islamic eschatology saying that's what's going to happen. Then Isa will make the Hajj as an equitable judge and fair ruler. Isa will help institute Sharia law. Isa will abolish Christianity. He's going to break crosses, kill all the swine, abolish the jizya, which is the Muslim tax on non-Muslims, and he's going to kill the Muslim Antichrist and his followers. This is our false prophet. The Mahdi fits the Antichrist. Isa fits the false prophet. I mean, they go hand in hand, one and the other. Guess what? They even have their own Antichrist, Dajjal. Dajjal, Antichrist, fits our Jesus. Dajjal is described as a deceiver who will possess miraculous powers. Jesus is coming back with his miraculous powers. He will claim to be the divine Jesus. You can't make this stuff up. Dajjal will be able to travel at great speeds on a giant mule. I'm sorry, that one's just funny. Oh, that was just funny. That one gets me every time. I can't get through that one without laughing. Dajjal will be Jewish. Hey, go figure. He's a Jewish Jesus. And he'll be followed by Jews and women. That fits the description of Jesus' ministry when he was on earth. And he will be slain by Esau. He will be slain by Jesus. No, ain't going to happen. But listen to this lady. I'm going to close with 2 videos. And I want you to listen to what this lady says, because I want you to understand, A, she's talking about Islamic infiltration, because they don't mess around. And the second video is going to be a guy who's asking, is there really moderate Muslim, basically? Because I need to land this plane and show you that, man, Islam is our contender. It's not our contender. We don't contend with flesh and blood, but against spirituality and principalities of the air. So what I'm saying, though, is, man, you need to be, keep your guard up. That's basically what I'm saying. Just know your surroundings. I want to be like Jason Bourne. When I walk into a restaurant, I know that the license plates of every car out in the parking lot, and I know that the guy eating with a left-handed fork means that he does this stuff because he's just bad to the bone. I want to be like Jason Bourne when it comes to the end times. If we're living in the end times, I want to be aware of it. So I want to make you aware of what she's saying. Watch this.
Education is one of the most important areas that Muslims have to address. And while our final objective, is not just to become part of the system that we experience now and that we see, our final objective is to create our own Islamic systems, and not only create Islamic systems for Muslims, but to look at all the other people who are sharing this country with us as potential Muslims. And if we look at them as potential Muslims and feel that we have the obligation, which Allah has told us, to try to bring them into the same style of thinking, into the same way of behaving, into the same objectives that we have, then we have to have some way that we can communicate with them and some way we can work with them. And in that long-range process of making America Muslim, all of America Muslim, then we have to have some actual short-range goals. We have to have some way of dealing with them and know how we're going to deal with them and in which ways, and be very calculated about it, or else we will not accomplish our goals. Well, I've always brought my children up, alhamdulillah, to think of themselves first, last, and always as Muslim. My little daughter, who's in 2nd grade, kept saying to her teacher, "I'm not American, I'm Muslim." And after a while, I started getting notes coming home saying, "What does she mean?" You know? And I got the same sort of notes from the school where we were overseas in a Muslim country, so-called Muslim country. The principal said, "What does she mean?" And she was in a Muslim country. And they would say, "Well, you're American, right?" She said, "No, I'm Muslim." And the principal here said the same thing. That shows that we have similar kinds of problems in approaching the field of education, whether we're living in a so-called Muslim country or whether we're living here in the United States. We should be involved. We should be involved at every level, the local level, the county level, the state level, the national level, and the international level. How are we going to be involved? We want to be involved as a distinct Islamic entity. And I say Islamic and not Muslim because there are lots of Muslims running around who don't even know what their agenda is and who start defining their agenda through the eyes of non-Muslims. So that I want to say Islamic. And if we are Islamic individuals and we come to our relationship and our connection with the public school system as Islamic individuals, then we will not be part of the great, what they call, American melting pot. We do not want to melt into American society and disappear. We want to go into American society with Islamic ideals and revamp their thinking. We want to revamp them. We want to turn them into Muslim individuals. When we do something, we choose what we do, and we do the amount of work that we know we can carry on consistently. The Prophet ﷺ said he likes us to be involved in consistent work. He doesn't like us to start something and drop it. He wants us to start something and continue with it. There are certain obstacles. Muslims have a lot of character building to do before they can even begin to communicate with the larger society. Muslims are lazy, they're late, they like to argue with each other, they like to fight with each other more than they fight with non-Muslims. They have an inability to analyze and synthesize ideas. They're not solution-oriented, they're problem-oriented. And they have a real problem with constructive criticism, and they have even a greater problem if that constructive criticism comes from women. We should try to be on the book review committees. There are book review committees for every type of subject, for the social studies books, for the literature books. Muslims need to join those book review committees and see what they're writing and have an input into how the curriculum will be. The book companies do listen to these book review committees, and they have to adjust because if they don't, they won't be bought for that school system. We should join teachers' unions and encourage Muslim children to be teachers. We need, inshallah, in the future to develop a National Muslim Council of Education.
So, the reason why I chose a video from 1989 to play for you was because I wanted you to see in 1989 what the objective was, and now you can look in 2022 and see exactly where this has all come. Everything that she said they need to do, they have done. They have implemented our school systems. They've implemented our government in a massive way. I dare you to go to Dearborn, Michigan, and try and go out there and preach the gospel in the streets. Sharia law basically exists in Dearborn, Michigan. What you don't know is about 5 or 6 years ago in Florida, Sharia law almost got passed in Florida, where women would have had to have been subject to Sharia law. It passed and it missed by passing by only like 2 votes. Like, this is here. We're living with this now because we haven't done anything about it. And maybe it's because we're ignorant to it. I mean, when I say our government's been infiltrated with it, listen to me. I won't, to avoid getting into certain politics, I'm not going to say certain things. Let me just tell you that at the highest levels, Islam has submitted themselves straight into our political system and is dictating laws that we don't believe in constitutionally as the United States, but we're also too silent about it. And so I want to finish with this last video, and it's a rare video. It's hard to find anything like this. I wish I could go to some of these Islamic compounds that I shared with you that are in America and ask these same type of questions, but you can't. The only video I found that actually exposes it for what it is, I'm about to play you, and I want you to pay close attention because I don't personally think that there's any such thing as moderate Islam. It's just like I don't personally think there's anything such as a moderate Christian. people who are moderate Christians who only show up Christmas and Easter only, I have to question how much they know my Lord and Jesus Christ, because he has commissioned us to do his work. And if only going on Christmas and Easter and you're not doing his work, I don't think you're a Christian. At least I don't think you're a moderate Christian. It's the same thing with Muslims. But I want you to watch what this leader that asked these questions says, and then we'll unpack it in the end.
Can we have this camera focusing on all the audience? Because every now and then, every time we have a conference, every time we invite a speaker, they always can come with the same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And we always try to tell them, I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media, doesn't mean they don't believe in them. So I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, just normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that men and women should sit separate? Please raise your hands. Everyone agree. Everyone agree. Brothers and sisters. Subhanallah. So it's not just these radical sheikhs then. Allahu Akbar. Next question. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind, and that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah. So all of you are saying that you are common Muslims, you all go to the different masajids, Norway, or are you like a specific sect, like the Islam net sect or anything like that? Are you like that? No. Are you like that? Please raise your hand if you're like this extreme Islam net sect or anything like that. No one. Allahu Akbar. How many of you just go to these normal masajids in Norway, the normal Sunni mosques? Please raise your hands. Allahu Akbar. So what's the politicians gonna say now? What's the media gonna say now? That we're all extremists? We're all radicals? We need to deport all of us from this country? Subhanallah.
You heard it straight from them. They're not looking at their beliefs as extreme at all. They're literally reading the Quran and saying, if it's described or prescribed in the Quran, then that's what we do. And that doesn't make us radical. That just makes us Muslim. And that makes us followers of Islam. All the way down to capital punishment, Sharia law, the entire thing. They honestly, and you heard him say, those are Sunnis. Shias are looked at as a little more extreme. Those were Sunnis in there who were all saying the same thing. Nope, if it's prescribed in the Quran, that's what we should do. And so I don't believe there's anything such as a moderate Muslim. And Muslims are all around us. And I'm not hating on Muslims. Please hear my heart. I have some acquaintances that are Muslim, and we get along fine. And I try and share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is understand. And let me give you a little pointer for that. Muslims love to be invited over for dinner. That's their culture, is eating together. I like to be invited for dinner too, so I'm open to the invite. But that's their culture. If you want to get into their culture and into their hearts and into their minds to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them, then invite them over to your house for dinner. It's culturally the most important thing you can do. So all I want you to do is be aware that the Antichrist is most likely going to be from the Islamic culture, because again, there's only one person who can sign that dotted line that says, hey, you can build that temple just north of the Dome of Rock and we can exist together, and that's the Imam al-Mahdi, or at least that's who they think he is when he comes back at the end days, and he's going to sign that covenant agreement with them that says, hey, you can do this. That's going to be the Antichrist that comes back, and you're never going to convince me that it will be anybody other than a Muslim, because only a Muslim is going to convince Muslims that that's okay. It's not going to be some slick willy that's going to come in and try and tell the Muslims that it's okay. It's going to have to be a brother of theirs, a Muslim brother of theirs, that's going to convince them of that. So be alert, be aware. None of this stuff is to scare you. None of this stuff is here. It's simply unpacking scriptures and trying to understand what God's timeline looks like, who the key players are going to be, so that we can be wise in these times. So keep watch and share the gospel with Jesus Christ everywhere you go. I love you. Dave Glander, Reasons for Hope. We'll see you on the last part 6, and it's going to be all about the rapture.